Today we are comparing the ports of a game that would cause you despair and distress as a child or even adult when it released by Capcom back in 1985. We aren't talking about the theme of Ghosts and Goblins, we are talking the sheer difficulty level here. You will die over and over again, you would have lost a lot of money not to even reach the second stage. The arcade game would leave you stressed out but wanting to play this again. A total love-hate relationship, as many popular arcade games in the 1980s, we got several home console computer versions, some great, some not so great. If I miss a port in this video, I truly do apologise. As always in my ports videos, we will start from the worst and work to what I personally consider as the most faithful to the arcade original. Now let us guide Sir Arthur to rescue Princess Prim Prim from Satan. Let's begin then by looking at the Commodore 16 conversion. As you can see in the gameplay, it is extremely basic and really looks older than its release of 1986. Of course, the Commodore 64 was much superior in many ways, and that reflects gameplay here. Something else to consider is the Commodore 16 was a replacement for the Commodore VIC-20. Let's put it like this then, the Commodore Plus 4 was considered higher end to this, and most know how basic that was. Is it a good game to play? Let's just say very basic, to the point where Arthur's animation doesn't change when he climbs ladders. Most annoyingly, once Arthur is hit once, you are dead. Unlike most other versions here, his armor will fall off and give the player another chance. No music and very basic sound effects. It is frustrating to play and actually reminds me more of the Hobgoblin Ghosts and Goblins clone rather than what it is trying to imitate. Lastly, if you need to duck for cover, don't expect a ducking function with the Commodore 16 conversion. Welcome to the bizarre land of DOS gaming, 1980s style. Now, firstly, the sprite design and colours used are pretty nice in this version. For the sounds that DOS games had back in the mid to late 1980s, the sound isn't that bad too for what it actually is. Now, on with the bad then. Firstly, Arthur kind of feels like he is floating when jumping. Physics with weight is totally bizarre here. This version doesn't multi-scroll either, it is a single screen affair, and that can get a little frustrating by not knowing what's lurking around on the next screen you visit. Range of weapon thrown is very short too, which means you have to fairly get close to enemies to kill them. The gargoyle is missing halfway through too. And finally, when you do reach the end of the first stage, the first boss appears to die. Whilst I'm waiting for the key to drop, he comes back. I kill him again, he disappears. On the third time he dies and the key then drops. Is this version good? It's interesting. We will just leave it there. The NEC PC88 conversion of this is a very frustrating one to play. Firstly, although this is a multi-scrolling version, it is very choppy as you can see in the gameplay. I tried different models of the PC88 and adjusted CPU speeds accordingly, and this was really the best settings I could get for this. It's a combination of poor frame rates combined with background colours used, which really make the game suffer. It's definitely a tough version, and the gargoyle doesn't leave you alone. Even if you manage to dodge past it, it will hunt you down without a doubt. No opening sequence in the PC88 version. Music and sound effects are average for a PC88 game. It controls fairly well, and at least it feels more like the source material compared with the poor DOS version. Poor For Amstrad, for Britain, we had three big 8-bit microcomputers, Spectrum, C64 and the Amstrad. Of course, many others came and went, but growing up, these were the three biggest. It normally seems that Amstrad gets the worst ports, and I think that is unfair considering it is a very capable machine. This is the case with the 1986 Elite release of Ghosts and Goblins. Firstly, the music seems to be a remix of some kind that kind of makes you feel like you are in some hardcore rave. I wasn't sure to play the game or invite friends around to do some happy hardcore party. Anyways, the game itself isn't the best. Certainly it resembles the source material, but almost with its own ideas. For example, the gargoyle appears after you cross the moving block to cross to the forest. And the worst thing of this is that, just like the Commodore 16 version, you don't have an armor to protect you. One hit and you are dead, it's that simple. For Amstrad fans, in the last few years, we have been blessed by a GX 4000 remake, as well as a 6128 Plus remake. Look them up on Google. Now, admittedly, the ZX Spectrum is very bare bones, and to some extent could be seen to slightly resemble the NEC PC-88 port, but trust me when I say that this plays really well. Okay, so it lacks music and sound effects are very rudimental too, but bypass this, and like I say, you have a lovely and quintessentially piece of British 8-bit microcomputer gaming history here. This version even comes with an introduction. Color clash can at first seem a little off-putting, but I have said before in videos that comes with the ZX Spectrum territory, especially in the old days of programming for it. It controls really well too with nice collision detection. The only annoying thing with this version is that as soon as you start the game, you move right, Arthur doesn't move at all. You soon realise that there's actually a tombstone right next to him from the get-go. Firstly, let's remind ourselves that this C64 game released back in 1986, and so games for this platform were just about ripening up with coders to make games look better after a few years of experimenting with what the C64 could and couldn't do. Is the C64 conversion by Elite any good? Yes it is. Although it is on the pixelated side, it is a nice 8-bit home computer port that plays well with very nice controller function. This actually received an update arcade version a good few years back where it was improved on too. Gameplay footage is the original release so for this video. One good thing about this version is that the gargoyle midway through stage 1 is fairly easy to defeat. We have no introduction for this version, it plumps us straight into round 1 from the get-go. The music is totally different too, but that's not a bad thing. The music by Mark Cooksey is top notch, and we also get some sound. When Arthur dies, this actually sounds remarkably similar to the arcade game. Overall, a nice port with fairly average difficulty level. Although the 1990 Elite release of Ghosts and Goblins on the Atari ST looks great and plays really nice too, if not a touch on the hard side, the real issue here is the zoomed in look where sprites are much larger than its arcade source. Granted, during stage 2 we make blind jumps, but for stage 1 to do this was a little strange. Like I say, by no means bad at all. It's a really nice version of the game with some nice music and sound effects, as well as colours that are pretty faithful to the original arcade version. Sprite design is really nice too in this version, and like every other version, sprite collision is pretty much spot on. Developers made damn sure that kids and adults would suffer through this regardless of the platform this game was put onto. I think many ST users in the early 90s would have really enjoyed this port at the time. As much as the Game Boy Color port is wonderful, it plays nicely and it looks great, granted, we are still looking for arcade accuracy here. As always, I must remain pragmatic and dismiss eye candy over practicality. Yes, this looks nice, but Just like the Atari ST conversion, this one is too zoomed in. As another example, Arthur blind jumps from the first stage off the hill we climbed up, whereas the source material had no blind jumps on the first stage. We will take into exception that is portable version, but still, to be nitpicky, there are other platforms on the colour which aren't zoomed in like this, Mario for example. As a game, it is definitely worth a purchase and play. It plays silky smooth and does have some nice music and sound effects, and like other ports here, it tends to get off on being extremely difficult. A seriously great 8-bit console port for this NES 1986 release, the conversion sets the scene with an introduction where Arthur's girlfriend is taken away, and it also displays the map of which stage you're about to face. It is a very responsive game to control, and did find this version really enjoyable to play. There is of course plenty of sprite flicker going on, but like I say in these videos, that really is part and parcel of Nintendo NES. If you played or grew up with a NES, this minor issue can easily be overlooked. In terms of music quality and sound effects, Ghosts and Goblins on the NES have both really, and both sound very good too. Graphics and sprite animation for a NES game of this period, which was 1986, was very good too. Considering the NES console itself was fairly new at this point, and many games were fairly basic too in the background behind this game. Nevertheless, good lord, this game is just as challenging as an arcade game, if not even harder. In terms of 16-bit home computer accuracy to the arcade game, the Commodore Amiga's 1990 release by Elite is way up there with its nice smooth graphics and nicely detailed sprite design and awesome controller response. The music and sound effects are very close to the source material that it was copying, and it just seemed like a really enjoyable home conversion of the arcade classic. It doesn't have frame drop issues, and it's very fluid to play too. Now, this was a close call between the Nintendo NES conversion and this version of course, and to be honest, as always, I look for accuracy, and although NES and Amiga both look great and play really awesome too, the Amiga's music just sounds a little truer to the original source material, the arcade game. And that's it for today's ranking the Ghosts and Goblin ports. Now just remember, this is my personal opinion how I rank these, it's not official. If you're new to the channel, if you've not seen it, I've also done the sequel to Ghosts and Goblins, which is of course a very awesome Ghouls and Ghosts, so do check that one out. And also drop a line in the comments section and let me know which version you perhaps might have chose to be in top spot. Which version did you grow up with? Anyways, until next time.